Great, hi everyone, hope you're all well. So as Becky said, I'm going to take you through embracing a test and learn culture. Test and learn, or A/B testing, is something that's very simple but actually quite a challenge to implement if you're working in a business or an agency. And with everything, I guess it comes down to people, so that's where the word culture, I wanted to bring that to the forefront of this, and actually how can we implement that in real life. So a bit about me and about growth. So I have been in marketing for about 10 years. I have worked in B2B, B2C and agency businesses, and predominantly my expertise lie in CRM and data-driven marketing. But more recently, coming back to the UK, so we were in Sydney for a year before that, I've actually started to become freelance. So I'm helping very small startups now to deliver digital marketing. So yeah, it's a real pleasure to be able to take you through these slides and explain a bit more about test and learn. So what we'll discuss, keeping it simple, so teaching some of you how to suck eggs for A/B testing and going back to basics. But really, I think the crux of what I want to get to is around how to make it actually happen, and some experiences and case studies that I've got of it. Why you should like test and learn, so it does make you look good in a business or an agency when it's done right, and we'll come on to why. No test too big or too small. So again, this is something that I learned when implementing it, is that it doesn't have to be the different variants or variables in digital communications that you're testing. You can use tests to actually build out a strategy to give it a better foundation moving forward and use it strategically to make quite big business changes. Then on to building your plans, so the steps that I'd recommend when you're building a test plan. Making it happen, so this is all about the culture and people. And then finally a Q&A where you can ask me something I don't know, which is quite a lot. So like I said, keeping it simple, but I think A/B testing, and I'll come on to exactly what I mean by that. From my experience, I've found that, yeah, it's good to implement, it gives you growth, but actually implementing it if you're working with multiple people in your team can sometimes be a challenge. So how do you rally around people and make sure that it becomes a culture and an ongoing, always-on process is what we're going to cover today. So, yeah, again, just to go back to basics, but we're splitting two experiences. So if you've got a customer database and you want to test something, A is the way that you do it currently, and you're going to test it against a new way or a hypothesis or assumption. So we call A the control or champion, and then we're going to test it versus B, which is your treatment or challenger. And then users are assigned equally, but randomly to those two experiences. And then we're going to measure the key metrics out the back of that. So what we start to understand is, okay, well, how do I optimize what I'm already doing, with A being your basis. So yeah, I found this quite funny, a few of these pieces on this slide, but some things in marketing just don't change, and I think we can all relate to a few of these things. So you might have heard of them, but Peter Field and Les Bonet, they did a huge bit of research into marketing effectiveness in business, and what they found is that businesses nowadays, and this is this graph, we're actually addicted to driving a short-term sales spike. So, you know, getting the next promotion out or changing a new campaign, and we're no longer doing this longer brand building piece. And I think what fits quite nicely alongside that is this set and forget element, which is where we all get that feeling when we've got the go live date and we're working up towards it. We're really looking forward to just kicking back after it's gone live. But what test and learn can help us do is almost make that the beginning of this. So you start with the end in mind, and actually going live is only the start of it. So you can then essentially optimize what you're doing further down the line. And then finally, customer shoes. So I think this is one that will ring true, is that when you work in a business for a while, or worked with a business for a while, you can sometimes think of yourself as the perfect customer. And for example, you might say, no one's on Twitter anymore, it's all about Facebook and Instagram. But that might be because they're the two apps that you use on your phone. Your customers and your industry could be very different for the different businesses that you're working for. So something that Test and Learn, I find, is the best to do is almost settle an argument. So if you're saying one thing, or you've got an opinion, or you think something's true, actually the best way to prove or disprove that is by testing it. So why is Test and Learn important? And like I said, it does make you look good. Forget all those cosmetic stuff. It's all about Test and Learn. So basically, you know, it's going to improve. If you're continually improving something, and things are getting better, then it's going to improve bottom line, which I'll come on to a few examples of that in a minute. And I think when I think about Test and Learn, it's about always learning. And we'll come back to that when we think about the culture element. But that's the way of thinking now that big businesses are implementing, almost teams, to look at experimentation as an always learning element. So I know this is probably something Marcus is going to talk about, definitely, but CRO, and we hear a lot more about this now, but it's about turning that really important dial. So I think we can sometimes get bogged down by engagement metrics and looking at what's working, but really the important stuff is looking at the goal that you really care about. So how do you find clarity in your tests by looking at that important metric? Low budget. So working with startups more recently, this is something that I've come across. So I want to do paid advertising, but I've only got a very small budget. And actually, if they're a startup, there's not a lot that you can learn from that's happened in the past. So something that Test and Learn's been really good for in the freelance work that I'm doing is saying, okay, well, let's do a bit of desktop research, understand what competitors are doing, what's happening out there, hypothesize and assume what could work, and let's just dip our toe in it before we invest a lot of money into paid advertising. So I think it can be really helpful in that situation as well. And finally, the bigger picture. So I'll talk to you a lot about, there's quite a few case studies for McDonald's in here, because the most recent role that I worked for was looking after the McDonald's account in Australia. So, and they really adopted this culture. So it was a really fantastic client to work with. But one thing that they always wanted to do was take the learnings from the digital space, so understanding changes in headlines, CTAs or audiences, to then bring that up into the above the line world. So they would spend a lot of money on media, digital media, TV advertising, as you know, but they wanted to take the learnings from that Test and Learn and digital space to put up into the bigger above the line. So there's just a few reasons why I think Test and Learn is important. So like I said, if you are using it and you're looking at that conversion metric, then it's going to hit your bottom line. So that's really fantastic, because we always want to be improving, and that's why Test and Learn is important. So this is just a few case studies. I particularly like the fries on this slide. It makes me very hungry.
Me too.
And working at McDonald's was always a bit of a chore. Not. Yeah, like I said, I was fortunate enough to work with McDonald's, and they had a CRM database, it might surprise you to know, of about 2 million. So it's strange to think of McDonald's as this kind of old-fashioned, big, well-loved brand to be quite digital, but what allowed them to do that was their app. So it was a different way of ordering for customers. So you could mobile order and pay. So you pre-order and then pick up your food. But what this meant is they started to collect a lot of data. So that was really valuable to them, and the key metric was for them to get more downloads and more transactions. So really that was my role, to drive the commercialisation of this app for them. So we started to bring on this Test and Learn culture. And some of the most simple tests, which I want to just illustrate to you now, can bring a really good uplift. But there's also an underlying rule in this to call out. So basically, we were sending out a lot of newsletters, and they were using this database to convert them to using the app. Now, there's a lot of things that are wrong with that, because there's no real value exchange with the customer. It's just about getting people onto the app. But we would use CTAs throughout these newsletters, and for a long time we've been saying download now. And our feeling within the team was, actually download now feels like a job to do for a customer. If I saw that, I'm going to think, I'm going to have to download an app. You know, I'm going to take me off to the app store, I'm going to download the app, and then, you know, I've probably forgotten about my fries by then, to be honest. So what we thought is, actually, can we test doing a bit more of urgent language? So we wanted to test download yours versus get yours now. A really simple test. And we were looking at click-through rate, yeah, but we also looked at the download numbers. And our hypothesis was true, but not true. So more customers did click on the get yours now, because of course it felt more instant. But the actual true read was when the installs were 124% uplift on the download now. So what that told us is that, yeah, quality versus quantity. The customers that were clicking on the download now did feel as though maybe it was a job. They knew they were going to have to download the app, but they'd go ahead and do it. But the ones where it was get yours now, actually they just, you know, thought that there was going to be some quicker way, I don't know, by drone maybe, that their fries might appear. So it was a really, you know, these sort of insights that we plucked out were so interesting, and as a team we really enjoyed looking at them. Not when I worked on, and this is all that I could find that illustrated Bing, by the way, it's a desktop background. But I love this story because it's about getting an idea through, and I think that's something else that Test and Learn can help you with. So Bing, there was a developer there, and he really believed that by changing the way that the advert headlines were displayed would significantly increase the way they were performing. So he put it as an idea, but it went into the pot of hundreds of other ideas. And Bing were like, yeah, well, it's going to take you time to implement that, and yeah, you say it's low cost, but we'll put it on the list. We'll put it on the list, it's fine. But an engineer came across it and saw that it was low cost, saw that it wasn't going to be a big job, and implemented an A/B test. Within weeks, they saw results that were too good to be true. It was an uplift of 12% in revenue, which was worth 100 million to them in the US alone, which is just such a huge amount of money, but really does prove that getting this right, and almost some of the simplest things, and also if you have an idea or an opinion, it's a really good way of getting your point across and proving or disproving it. Cool. So no test too big or too small. So we talked a little bit there about digital communications and how you might test and implement there. But something that, whilst I was working in Australia in the agency, was I was a strategist, so I spent a lot of time building plans for McDonald's and Volkswagen. And one that I did for McDonald's, I think, rings true in this, around how if you put that you want to experiment in your strategy, then it already gives it a lot more meat on the bones, because you know, if you're pitching to a client or you're trying to sell a plan to a business, you're often more than not just putting your opinion forward. So what a way to just put in there to say, yeah, this might not be all completely, you know, going to change your revenue or turn a dial immediately, but here's a few ways that I know I can optimize it, or things that I'd like to test to make it better straight away. So the way that I like to call these, the first one is the bigger one. I call this more of a game changer. And that's a test or an experiment that you do that might change the whole strategy around your audience maybe, or your business, or your customer experience. And we'll come a bit more into McDonald's and how that worked for them. And then you've got the day-to-day ones, which is the A/B testing around the variants, where it's subject lines, CTAs, or headlines, creative, all those different variants that we can test. So, yeah, McDonald's had this brilliant segmentation built for them. So they had this data, and it was great that they had the transactions from the app as well, which meant that they could build this basic behavioural segmentation based on what you were eating, when you were eating it, how often you did it, hopefully not too often, and then how recently you did it as well. So it was really interesting to get your hands on this data, because what it allowed us to do was plot it on this chart that basically was how much money they were spending, how frequently, and then the size of the bubble was the amount of money that's worth to them. And that, from a strategy point of view, what you can then do is go, okay, well, how do we want to change the behaviour of these customers, and how might we do that? And when you've only got data to tell you what's right, a really great way of setting out a strategy is to say what you can test. So actually we looked at these segments, and actually we went back and said this is about driving profitability. And the way that you'll do that, MACCA'S, is by increasing value. So whether they spend more or do it more frequently. Loyalty, so can you make them do it again and for much longer, lifetime value. And then cost efficiency, so they were using a lot of offers to get people into the app, and almost generic offers across the board. So the behaviours of each of these segments helped us to understand, okay, well they might not be that offer reliant as a customer, and I'll come on to talk about that a little bit more. So from a testing point of view, it helped us to, what we first did was get under the skin of what each customer was about. I'll tell you a bit more about how we did that. But we set out proposed strategic profitable goals for each segment. So for example, there was a coffee segment, McCafe, if anyone's had a McCafe before. And what we did was just think about the customer, understand the data and what we're seeing, and think about the situation they're in. And these turned out to be very habitual customers, they're on the go, and coffee is such a behaviour that it turned out to be a very loyal segment for McDonald's. So one of the tests that we put forward was, okay, well actually would customers still use the app because it had a loyalty punch card in there without offering them something extra on top? So that was one of the first tests that we proposed. So this was a really great way, I think, of thinking about that bigger picture and setting out your strategy, but putting in there your test to give it strength. So, and identifying and experimenting with customer data longer term. So the outcome of that was actually, it grew into something a bit bigger. So McCafe was seen as an opportunity for McDonald's, and digital became a bit more of a focus in that. So whereas in the past brand would be doing brand stuff and going to TV and doing above the line stuff, and then the digital would be very separate, they started to pull the digital into the above the line and vice versa. So for the first time, it was something that had joined together because we'd had the opportunity to look at the data, set out the strategy and learn before we could do some of that stuff. Cool. So building your plan. So these are just the steps that I think are quite key when you're pulling together a plan. If you've got data and insight reports, great, there's a lot of it out there, and sometimes it can be quite hard to understand what's important versus what's not. But I think any data is great. If you haven't, then start your hypothesis, start your assumption. That's okay, because we're going to learn as we go through what works and what doesn't. But measurement at the end I'll come to is quite key. So then I would say actually build a workshop. If you're in a team, this is where the culture bit comes in. Get people in a room, start to think about the insights that you've got from those data and reports, and then some of the variants that you might test, or some of the things you want to learn. And I don't know about you, but I think people enjoy telling me what's wrong with things. Like, so if you put together a plan, or you might propose an idea, people are very good at saying, well, I don't think that'll work. Okay, well, why? And that's the gold dust that you need, because that's your hypothesis, that's your assumption, that's your test, essentially. So I think a workshop is a really good way of getting everyone involved. And then hypothesize, so here we want to just say what we think our opinion is, what we think, why it won't work, why it will work, and then that's the form, the basis of which you then build your test off the back of. So prioritization, so when people do say things are wrong, they say a lot is wrong. So you could get a really long list of different assumptions and opinions. So a really good way to prioritise it is to think about the opportunity to the business. So how much opportunity is there from a point of view of improving, and then from an ease of getting it done point of view. So how much time or money is it going to take to implement this? And if you score each one out of 10, even on an Excel spreadsheet, you could just then sort it, and it's going to give you the top priority. So it's a really easy way of just opportunity versus ease, I would say. So calendar the tests. This is something that I learned quite quickly, is that if you have a test and learn plan and it's separate from something that your team and everyone is looking at, then it gets missed. So you need to make sure that these tests are somewhere where everyone is looking, almost every day, or if you have like a team chat, make sure it's all in that place, because sometimes that can be where the ball drops. Action. So yeah, I mean, we could talk a lot more depth around how to actually do the test, what platforms are out there for you, you know, statistical significance. So in actually getting a test out there and done, there's a lot of information out there. But I would say if this is the first time you're setting up lots of tests, actually getting some out there and experimenting is the important part, and learning. And you'll soon be able to understand what platforms are best for you to use, whether it's for websites or for CRM. And often CRM database or platforms have split testing functionality, so you can use that there. Measure. So I think we hear that everywhere we go now, but don't forget to look back, because that's what's going to help you move forward. So yeah, any data that you've got to be able to measure, and it's really important to think about, that might be number 7 on there, but it needs to be up with number 1 as well, because if you haven't got the way that you're going to measure it set up, then often more than not, you're not going to understand how the test worked. And finally, optimize. So again, when I was doing this process in multiple businesses, we'd get to the end, learn something, but then not put the winner live. So you're left with a learning and a test that worked really well, but it wasn't actually optimized. So I think that's the final bit. And then you loop all back around again. So, you know, you could just keep going, and that's the point of it being continual optimization, is that this is an always-on process that you follow. Culture. So I've got a scary slide coming up, but it's because I typed the word cult into Google, and you'll see what came up. But I think the word culture and everyone working towards one goal is really important when you're trying to put in a new process or something that's continually on. Because if everyone's not for the same end goal, then often that's when the ball will drop. It's a scary slide, a scary slide. But what I wanted to call out is just some of the different roles involved in getting this plan up and running and live. And like I said, it is an always-on approach, and everyone's involvement is really key, and there's power in the people making it happen. So I think you could spend a lot of time learning and understanding around how the tests are working, how to set them up, measuring them and everything, but if you haven't got everyone lined up and involved, then they might not happen. So when I worked in agency world, I would be the strategist, and really this is the person that sometimes is leading the workshop or implementing the plan and is closest to the data, and the customer should be. So really what you're saying there is they should be the person that's leading this process. Then you've got the creative team, which you can put a brief into the creative team, but if they don't understand what you're asking them to test, or they don't understand the psychology or the customer thinking behind it, then often you're going to get a creative that doesn't speak the test that you really want to learn from. Campaign manager, so yeah, the person that might be getting it live, clicking go, send, you know, building it in whether it be Google or social, you know. So if they're not on top of it, then it might be that they just didn't see it on the other document that's hidden under test and learn plan in a folder. So it's really important to keep them involved. Analysts, so like I said, they will help you at the start and at the end. So if they don't understand why you're doing a test, then they don't know what to measure. So really important there. And then back to the strategist, so identifying results and thinking about the insights. And that's the fun bit really, is going, okay, well, what happened? And I think it's really fun when you can highlight something green versus red, almost like a traffic light system, and go, yeah, winner, loser. And what I wanted to point out is that if you bookend this process and there's one person that's interested in delivering a test and learn plan, then potentially, or most definitely, you'll get one that's undelivered or unmeasured tests, and then you'll feel a bit poo at the end of the day. So other considerations, just a few things to think about when you're doing tests. So quantity versus quality, when we think about CRO, always think about that KPI. What is the real goal or behaviour that you're looking for? And it will help you to prioritise what tests to do. significance and statistics. So you could look into that a lot online. There's tools out there, so even things like MailChimp that has a form that you can type numbers into and it'll tell you whether it's significant or not. Basically what we're saying here is if you've got quite a small audience and you're splitting it in two, then your test might not be significant. But you've got two things to play in your favour, so the size of your database or the customers and time. So if you have got a small database, then repeat the test or make it go on a bit longer. So they're two of the variables that you can use to make sure you get a bit more of a significant test. Start with the end in mind. So like I was saying about that game-changing plan for McDonald's, think about test and learn and put it in at the start, because it really will help you to sell in an idea or get a new campaign over the line. And then ponder. So when I think about testing and test and learn or experimentation, I think about people, platforms and data. So think about people, they're your customers and your team, and they're the two important people. Platforms, so how am I going to do this? Where am I going to do it? And then data, so what insight have I got and how can I measure this? So yeah, that's what I'm going to take you through on test and learn. Have you got any questions? Awesome.